Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Journey of Development. We are going to be talking about sales enablement today. The goal for our program is to facilitate a meaningful learning experience and a discussion that is engaging and insightful. The format for the event will allow each panelist to share their perspective on the topic of sales enablement. Once each of our panelists share their experience and insights, we'll open up to the audience for questions. Please submit your questions to the Q&A feature at any time. Panelists, please refrain from answering any questions until we open up to the Q&A segment so we can openly discuss the responses live. Before we start with our panelists, I'd like to introduce myself and Scrimmage. As a continuous learner, I feel engaged and empowered learning from the experience of others, and to create the journey of development as a way for me to continue my own personal development while also supporting others with their development and growth. As the Director of Business Development for Scrimmage, I work with organizations to support the employee journey from onboarding through their entire employee lifecycle. Scrimmage is not only an early innovator of learning technology, but also a leader in the field for sales enablement. The Scrimmage platform is a secure enterprise mobility ecosystem built to engage, motivate, and create connection across the organization for more meaningful interactions, greater proficiencies, and overall work performance. Let me know if you have any questions for me about the results you can achieve with Scrimmage after our program today. Our first panelist today is Brynn. Brynn helps sales business unit leaders, HR leaders, and training teams implement and optimize initiatives designed to align human behavior to changing business strategies. He has been a salesperson, sales manager, sales enablement analyst, and sales enablement consultant to Fortune 500 companies. He currently leads a team of sales and service enablement professionals in a Fortune 100 company, where he prioritizes solutions and architects knowledge content, curriculum, and communications, and support for reps. Brynn has been named one of the most influential people in sales by Sales and Marketing magazine, and a thought leader in sales enablement by Miller Heiman, and he's a co-founder of the Sales Enablement Society. A little known fact about Brynn is he is also one of the few people on the planet who has practical sales enablement leadership experience coupled with a PhD in organization and management. Welcome, Brynn.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nicole. I appreciate it. Good discussion today. It'll be fun.
Awesome.
I thought we could have a good discussion, and maybe what we'll do is just kind of position this idea of sales enablement in the broader landscape. One of the things that I've been focused on is really focusing on the customer conversation that our reps have. In my current role, it's a challenge, and there are many different ideas, different types of solutions, different types of products, different types of technology coming at our teams, and the gap between what we would like them to do and what they're able to do on the customer conversation is difficult. So one of the things that I'd love to hear is questions around that from you guys. I'm happy to answer that in the Q&A. I put up here a poll, and I'd love for you to answer that when you guys are ready. I wanted to get your background and some of your thoughts so I could tailor the Q&A around how you define sales enablement in your company. What are some of your thoughts around sales enablement for 2019 and where you're going? And I can share some of our thoughts and what I'm doing. And then also, who's the customer of sales enablement? And this is an interesting discussion that we're actually having in my own organization around who's the ultimate customer and perhaps even the beneficiary of the work we do. And then who is our internal customer that we're serving in the role of sales enablement. And I think when you look at that, one of the things that I would love to hear from you guys around is this idea of sales enablement. Is it a project, like an initiative to you? Is it a program, perhaps a curriculum, perhaps a new hire training that you're rolling out? Or is it something bigger than that? Is it a function providing services to executives? And what does that look like? And I think that's the challenge I see with sales enablement today. When we define it, there are lots of different ways to look at it, and it kind of depends on what your remit is, what your goals are, what your objectives are, and then what outcome you're trying to drive. And so in that, there are a lot of different opinions. And in my own research and even in my own background, it depends on who you talk to. Some look at sales enablement as the set of projects that they're working on, perhaps to roll out, battle cards, or looking at a couple of modules in a curriculum. Others look at it as their suite of programs that they run, perhaps their new hire training programs or the campaigns they're running, and that's how they define it. One of the things that we've been working on in the last 2 to 3 years is this idea of what's the function of sales enablement, how do you fund it, and then how do you provide services to the leaders that you're supporting as they try to change the customer conversation. So that's one area that I wanted to start with, is how do you define it? What are you looking at for sales enablement? And have you wrestled with that idea of sales enablement? And then more importantly, would other people in your organization agree with your definition? And then what are some ideas that you might have? So that's one bucket, is the definition. When you look at the evolution of sales enablement, that's the second bucket of how do I see sales enablement evolving. When you look at where it's come from, there are different types, and we worked on this in the Sales Enablement Society, was, what are the different flavors of sales enablement? Some have a administrative remit or a focus. Some are sales operational in nature, looking at technology, et cetera. Others are human development or training backgrounds, and then there's also the marketing angle of sales enablement. So when you define sales enablement and you look at what the projects or initiatives or the programs or the services you're providing, and then it becomes, well, what's the scope? Are you providing administrative support to reps? Are you providing training, et cetera, to reps? Or are you doing perhaps a set of strategic initiatives that your executives want you to tackle? So that's the second bucket, is how do you scope and then evolve your remit there. And then the third area that I thought we could just kind of maybe explore in this idea of sales enablement is, how do you position it, sell it, and fund it, especially since most organizations that I've worked with in my consulting career and through the work that I've done don't have existing sales enablement functions. And if they did, it's kind of morphed from a past function. So for example, the training organization has been relabeled as the enablement function. So therefore they've got a training remit. And so we fund training, they do training, and then we give them initiatives to go do. And, fighting for that resource is oftentimes grounded in the idea of we provide training. So how do you reposition and resell it, and then also have it become more of a functional view that it really is a guardian or a steward of resource, and then also drives business outcomes, and how do you position that? So those are three areas that I thought might be good. Is how do you define it, and then how do you look at sales enablement evolving, and then how do you fund it? So I thought that would be a good opening piece for me. So that I just want to leave this into a conversation piece, leave it there. I'll come back to the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And then also, Nicole, I don't know if the poll is up there, but I think that would be good if we could go ahead and get everybody's answer to that, and then we'll take it from there. And I will yield the floor.
The polling questions: how do you define sales enablement in your company? Everyone's saying all of the above. So you've got pretty consistent there. What's your plan for sales enablement in 2019? Optimize existing programs and support new strategic initiatives is equally split. Okay. And then who's your primary internal sales enablement customer of the services you provide? We're seeing about an equal split between CEO and sales VP. Okay, good.
Yeah, so in that, the strategic, so in bucket number 2 or question number 2, that's an interesting one, because there's optimizing the existing programs and obviously taking them to the next level, but then there's implementing the strategic initiatives that are coming. And one of the things that I've seen is more of a say in those strategic initiatives based on data and based on the analytics, if you will, from the sales enablement function. So, for example, in one of the organizations that I worked in, the idea of understanding the customer conversation, how do we put analytics behind that? How do we get insight into that through inbound calls or outbound calls? And then figure out the trends and then build specific programs to tackle specific customer pain points, as an example, right? So CEOs and VPs of sales want to know what's going on these calls, and then are they able to work with the sales enablement leadership to actually build programs to tackle that. That's a little bit more of a blend of training plus knowledge management plus perhaps even technology to close that. So I think we're seeing more, I'm seeing more sales enablement leaders have a seat at that table to drive the go forward approach to enabling the customer conversation.
That's awesome. I'm going to jump our person, which is Paul, and then once each person has had a chance to share a perspective, we'll come back as a collaborative. You ready, Paul?
I am ready.
Paul Bickford, award-winning global thought leader in the sales enablement space. A graduate of the Virginia Military Institute, Paul has over 20 years of experience in sales, sales management, sales training, coaching, and leadership development. He brings firsthand real-world knowledge to the organizations he works with to drive sales results. Paul has worked in many industries over the years: wholesale distribution, manufacturing, vacation real estate, software, internet, telecommunications, and professional fundraising. Having worked for companies like Comcast, Trulia, and Ferguson Enterprises, Paul has trained and coached over 12,000 people all over the world and continues to consult with sales leaders and CEOs on sales solutions to transform their teams and create results. He holds a Six Sigma green belt and boasts a plethora of sales training certifications. His acting background makes him an engaging and motivating keynote speaker, and he coaches and mentors others in a volunteer capacity in his personal life as well as with different groups. Paul's book, It's Never Too Late to Become What You Could Have Been, is being published soon. The book teaches how to use sales methodology and leadership development strategies to advance one's career and personal pursuits and relationships as well. Paul is currently the Global Director of Sales and Channel Enablement at Oracle Software and the Denver Chapter President of Sales Enablement Society. He's also an active member of the Association of Talent Development and an officer of American Association of Inside Sales Professionals, Denver Chapter. His specialties include sales, sales training, leadership coaching, business planning, performance management, sales strategy creation, polished public speaker, presentation skills, training and development, and a skilled negotiator. How do you have time to do your work with all of that?
Oh, well, every day is a new day. Every challenge a journey, but thanks for asking.
Amazing background. You're very involved, and that's awesome.
Well, thanks. And I enjoyed our conversation yesterday. I think it's a prelude to what we're doing today on this panel.
Agree. You ready to share some of your insights into what you're doing from a sales standpoint?
So one of the things I often talk about with sales enablement, and like Brian was talking about, what does it mean to a given organization? I think the challenge that we have in the space is a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And because, a lot of your senior leaders have a lot of tenure and credibility and experience in their given function, be it sales, marketing, senior leadership of whatever sort, whatever misperceptions or confusions around what we do that they have, you have to be very delicate politically with trying to explain and share without feeling like you're stepping on their toes or making them look like they don't know what they're talking about. And so I like to talk about what I call the anatomy of performance and talk about how, regardless of what I'm doing, what you're responsible for is, the business metrics, measurable business outcomes that you're accountable for are the same whether I exist or not. And that my job is not to add to your inbox, but to help you achieve what you're accountable for anyway, more effectively with greater results in less time. And so the anatomy of performance, as I break it down, is you need three things to do a job. You need skill, will, and ability. So skill can be taught. We spend a lot of time in enablement talking about sales training and teaching the right knowledge and skills for a sales group to be successful, but that's only one part of it. So I feel like the other two get missed a lot. You know, ability is two parts. It's innate talent. So I say you hire for talent, you can train skills. You can't train talent. And when I talk about that, I use the metaphor, you can't carve Michelangelo's David out of Play-Doh. We have to have the right clay to sculpt the salespeople that we want to produce the results that we need. And so if half of ability is talent, and we hire for talent, how are we assessing for that? Are we asking behavioral interview questions like, tell me about your biggest success in your career and how did you get there? Tell me about how you handled a time where you had to handle internal challenges possibly and manage up to your boss in a politically delicate situation. Tell me about how you've overcome objections with customers to close deals, whatever, versus what are your greatest strengths? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? You know, or my gut told me this would be a good hire. So are we really assessing and getting full visibility into talent before we bring people in? And I've got some tools that I use for that. And then once we have the right people, the other part of ability besides talent is, do they have the right tools, resources, and environment to be successful? You know, do they have the right tools for marketing? Do they have the right environment, selling environment to be successful? Is there the right leader in place to drive that, you know? And that bleeds into, if we have skill, will, and ability, will, sometimes in a conversation with performance management, you know, is it skill or will? Do they not know how to do it or do they not want to do it? And if not, why is that? You know, so there's intrinsic will, which is, you know, a component of emotional intelligence. And again, that's something you hire for, people that have a real drive to succeed, and there are ways you can measure for that. But then again, extrinsic will is about employee engagement. And do we have the right, you know, from top down, from senior sales leadership down, the right people in place to drive performance, to motivate people to be successful in that organization, which dovetails into the piece around sales management. You know, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years around the big sexy thing is, ooh, sales management enablement. Hey, we have to enable sales managers. And there's some great stuff that's come out from CSO Insights and some others, I think Miller Hyman as well, around sales management metrics and some of that. But I've always said that sales management is just part of sales enablement. I don't think we should call it a different thing. That's just part of the, you know, of the big mix of stew of all the things that go into sales performance. And, you know, I spent a lot of time focusing on the after, you know, training and tooling, coaching, and making sure that managers know how to coach, they know how to manage people. Performance management is something that I don't think exists formally in a lot of companies, even though some I think will pay lip service to it. Out of my experience, because, you know, what do we do in sales? We take the top salesperson, we put them in charge of the group, and we say, make everybody like you. Go get them. And it doesn't give any credence to, do they have the ability to be successful as leaders? Because it's a different skill set and set of competencies. Are you providing training to them on how to supervise others, how to coach, how to manage team performance versus being an individual contributor, and then providing the right inspection, which takes us up to the next level. And as I was talking to you yesterday, I think the next set of conversations that's going to come out that I don't think is happening at a macro level in the function yet is, if, as we've had this epiphany as a corporate function of, ooh, we need to make sure the managers are driving the salespeople. The next conversation is, how do we get senior sales leaders at VP level to drive the manager piece from a performance management standpoint? Because I think there's a lot of misperceptions. When I've had conversations with sales VPs, whether spoken or unspoken, I hear things like, well, I don't have time to give them oversight. If they don't already know how to do it, they're not the right person for the job. Or, yeah, I just don't have time to do that. I have to be more strategic. And I think those things are cop-outs. I'll just be honest. And so as we talk about in sales enablement, needing to have a seat at the table and be strategic, is being able to influence some of those accountabilities from the C-suite to drive the VP level of employee engagement. And it's got to be a cultural shift. I think about Peter Drucker says culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we've got to make sure that there's a culture of approachability. There's a culture of where people can make mistakes and it's not a career limiting move. And we can learn from those and move forward, where we can have better alignment and collaboration for the initiatives that we want to drive for success. Because I like what Siobhan Thatcher said at our Sales Enablement Society conference in September. She's one of our San Francisco chapter members. She said, sales enablement is not responsible for sales, but we are responsible to sales. And so the senior sales leaders are our customers, but they still have to drive the structures. They still have to implement and support the things we put into place to actually get the results. We can't do that part for them. And I think it's important to delineate who does what by when, get agreement for that, help people in those different sections of the organization understand why their part is so important and how they're not just helping us, they're helping themselves with what they're accountable for anyway, whether it's sales or marketing or otherwise, and really driving that. I think the last thing I'd mention is, and I guess it's really aligned with my last point, we talk so much about strategy. Strategy is important, absolutely. But where I see things fail a lot, and I don't know if my panelists would agree, I would think they would, is we put in place a sales strategy, a go-to-market strategy, we try to drive it with certain things, and if it's not successful, we say, well, that wasn't the right strategy. Let's come up with a new strategy. And we go back to the drawing board, and what, in my experience, where things fall apart, it's not the strategy piece, it's that there's no accountability on the tactical implementation, that next level down. What do people need to be doing and saying on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? I would say things that should go in your Outlook calendar for inspection and visibility at any point. Is it happening? Is it happening to the level of quality that those things should? And those activities, I just think that a lot of that is not given oversight because of these misconceptions of, oh, I don't have time to do that, or, oh, they know what they need to do, they should just go do it. And we focus on lag measures, sales results, do we hit them or not, versus the lead measures of those activities that lead to sales. And as a CEO that I worked with once said, if you focus on lead measures, you'll accidentally sell something because you're involving yourself in the right cadence and hygiene of sales behaviors that lead to those end results versus just cracking the whip with your eye on the North Star of what that quota looks like, which I don't want to go down a rabbit hole and then I'll be quiet. But it's so funny. CSO Insights puts out some great data. Miller Hyman does. And so I know in 2017, they said that 53% or 63% of salespeople hit their quota, and it fostered a lot of discussion that should be there. Why not? What can we do? What can they do? What's getting in the way? I think we got to take a step back and say, where the heck are these quotas coming from? I work for companies and say, who comes up with these numbers? And I know the answer. Well, the private equity company or the board or the stockholders, they want a certain number. So we tell the company, you need to produce these results, and then they drive it down without necessarily a connectivity to what's the market intelligence, what's the amount we can get. I had one company I worked with, and they hadn't hit their number in 2 years, but they increased their quota 10% every year. What is that? Why is that? So I don't know. I just feel like it's got to be a balance of so many things. And I always say when I teach people how to do what we do, I say, look, you don't have to play all the instruments. That's exhaustive and it's not possible. But you've got to be an excellent conductor and show these people why they need to play their instruments and create this harmony of all these moving pieces and influencing without authority to make sure we can help get those results that we're responsible for. And I dropped the mic, and that's it for me.
I wanted to jump in on so many pieces of what you had to say. Just from my experience, there's so much going on there. But I'm going to hold my peace here. Thank you so much. You've created some great thoughts and questions that'll come forward. We're going to jump into Brynn, and then we'll open up for that Q&A and start that open discussion. Brynn Tillman is a successful sales professional sales trainer and coach spanning over 3 decades who has unlocked the power of LinkedIn for sales and business development professionals. For over a decade, Brynn has been teaching leveraging LinkedIn for business development, has authored the LinkedIn Sales Playbook, a tactical guide to social selling.
I do lots of fun things and happy to talk about enablement introductions.
Awesome.
So I, first of all, I'm absolutely in awe of the subject matter experts on this call. My experience with sales enablement is really selling into sales enablement. It's not actually, in that role. But I know in this new buyer's journey, sales enablement is an absolute necessity to make sure that our field reps and our inside sales and everyone is equipped with what they need to be successful. So the way that I see sales enablement in my clients and in the people that I engage with is they're the overarching umbrella of all of business development. Like they sit above anyone that touches anything that touches business development activities. Everything from new business to cross-selling to upselling to whatever new business, whatever business is coming through the door, sales enablement has a tentacle in that. And that's really exciting. And it's also a daunting task as well, because it's really about juggling so many different moving parts and making sure that they all come together to be successful. So I loved the orchestra analogy earlier. I often say sales enablement is the producer of the Broadway show. So it's a similar kind of thing, right? We've got people that are painting, we've got the set, we've got people that are sewing the costumes, we've got the actors, we've got the dancers and the choreographers and the musicians. And so all of these elements throughout the organization, and all of those are marketing and sales in some capacity, have to be produced and directed by somebody. And that in today's world seems to be that sales enablement person that's taking all of the talents that are out there and making them work together so that they can perform in a way that delights the audience. So that's sort of the perspective of coming to what sales enablement does as far as, kind of that big picture. Now, what I find interesting in this new buyer's journey, one of the stats that was thrown out was the CSO Insight. One that I love really bridges the gap between marketing and sales, which sales enablement sits over, is a corporate vision stat. And that's 74% of buyers choose the vendor that provided insights early in their journey. That's not price. All the things our salespeople might argue about, they're getting chosen because they're providing insights early on in the journey. Those insights, although sales has that in their core, really rely on a lot of marketing to provide some of that and to provide the content that, whether it's from case studies and success stories to overcoming content that overcomes objections or preempts objections, to just thought leadership that shows the sales rep as the subject matter expert. All of these things have to come together in a way that's meaningful to the buyer. So when we've heard in the past, marketing is not creating content or leads that I like, and the sales in marketing is saying sales is not following up on the leads that we provide, sales enablement's job is to make them play nicely. Like they're the ones that are bridging that gap and kind of breaking through the silos so that the two can play nicely, along with lots of other roles. And so from my perspective as a social selling trainer and mentor and coach, the magic of sales enablement is making all of this talent work and play in the sandbox nicely. And again, I think it's one of the most challenging roles inside of an organization, but it can be the most rewarding. And, I heard a couple of times, like, how are we measuring the success of sales enablement? And it's really, well, every company is going to have their own KPIs and goals and whatever it is, but it's really making sure that they get a standing ovation once that Broadway show has been performed. So I know I didn't go on and on as much as the brilliance of Brian and Paul, and I'm absolutely honored to be on a panel with these incredible minds, but that's my perspective of sales enablement.
I think that you've each shared some really great insights, and you touched on the buyer's journey. I think that's where the hot word of the day, so to speak, everybody's talking about aligning sales with the buyer's journey. In your mind, what does that look like?
Well, the buyer's journey right now, I mean, it's changed significantly. When I started in sales, I started right out of college at Dun & Bradstreet in an inbound call center. And no one could get information on collections or credit without talking to someone in my organization. I'm aging myself, but in 1990, there was no internet to go searching. And if they wanted information, they had to call us. So the buyer's journey was, hey, I think we might have a need. Let's call Dun & Bradstreet and their competitors and have them send us information that we can put out on the table and evaluate. Well, that gave us, the salesperson, a lot of power and control, and we knew who was looking early on. And so we could really engage with them in a way that by offering really great insights and doing a good job of providing value, that we ended up the vendor of choice. The new journey, according to, well, there's two stats out there, but the challenger sales stat is 57% of the buyer journey is done online, really, before any salesperson even knows that the buyer is in the market. So a lot, and there's another stat, I can't remember, it might be CSO Insights, that was as high as 67% of that journey is completed. So that's a lot of completed journey without us being aware, but we can change that and we can also influence that. So the buyer, we need to influence the buyer's journey. Go back to that 74% of buyers choose the vendor that provided insights. It may not be a conversation, but it could be a download. It could be a video that they watch. And we as an organization need to be providing those insights as early on as possible. And we need to be positioning our sales reps, not as sales reps, but as subject matter experts and thought leaders that solve problems, not sell you something. And so that's where the shift of the buyer's journey has changed. And one last piece, and I'll hand it off. The most important thing as a seller in the buyer's journey is to stop telling them how you can help them and just help them. And that's the biggest shift that I'm seeing. We can no longer pitch and get business. We have to provide value and resonate. And going back to kind of the sales enablement piece of that, that's bridging that gap between marketing and making sure that those salespeople are equipped with the insights they need to be found by, the SEO, their LinkedIn profile, their online footprint, to make sure that they are being found and they are resources for their buyers and be part of that 57 or 67%. So when that buyer does pick up the phone or reach out, we're at least one of the vendors, if not the only vendor, that they're starting with.
You conjure up pictures. I always, when I talk with people, I share with them about my own personal journey in sales. I honestly never intended to be a salesperson. I was pushed. Literally, I had a boss that kept saying, you should be one of my salespeople. And I said, no, that's not for me. I kept drawing the thought process of a used car salesperson, someone shoving something at you that you may not want, but they're just going to give it, throwing it at you. And I think that I really love the way that the journey is changing, where you are a trusted advisor. You're really helping them along in that process. You're building relationships. And I think more companies are taking stock and value into that and building that into their processes. Paul or Brian, do you want to speak to that buyer journey, or have any comments before we go to the next question?
Sure. I absolutely agree with the idea of the definition of trust has moved on past, solution and being a technical expert to somebody who drives action and solves problems. I think about 8 years ago, I worked on what I call a problem-centric approach to selling, and I think salespeople like to call those opportunities, but on the buying side, they call them problems. And it became the agility selling methodology that's out there. But that idea of what's the customer's problem, how do we help them frame it out and solve it, is actually where salespeople need to add the most value, because in today's world, a lot of organizations, as we know, and it's a bit cliche, but change is constant. Most of the buy side roles have evolved because of the new economy, because of the new technical skills, because of the customers that are out there and where we're at. So change is accelerating, and we know that. But if you think about what it does to the buying side of the desk or the phone, et cetera, most of the people that are in these jobs actually are doing tasks and tackling issues that don't necessarily align to their job title. So the definition of a job has radically changed, and it becomes more about the hats you wear. Most sales methodologies talk about that as the financial decision maker, the coach, et cetera. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the who's doing what to solve what problem. And an example of that is obviously if we need to increase revenue, there are people that do that. But in the context of an initiative of perhaps we need to merge databases, we need to move a data center, we need to change how we route phone calls, we need to change our go-to-market in a specific region. Who's around the table in that, and then how does that back into the solution that you're selling? Most salespeople can't answer that because they don't know what problem they're solving for their customer. And one of the things that I've done is I've trained, 10,000, 20,000 people around the world. About 15 years ago, I started this idea of I'll give you $100 if you can come up on stage or in front of the room and talk about your customer without mentioning your product, your service, your company, or anything about yourself. In other words, I just want you to talk 2 minutes about your customer. And so inevitably I'll get one person who wants to do that. And over the course of 10 or 15 years I've done this, I've had 100 people come up and do it. Not one person can make it 2 minutes without bringing up their product, their service, their solution, or their company. And this is the gap, right? So the gap is on the customer side, on the buyer side, they spend 80 hours a week talking about problems, 80 hours a week talking about their challenges without ever talking about your company. And here we have salespeople that can't make it 2 minutes, understanding the role and the hats that buyers wear, let alone the palette of problems that they need to solve. And when you think about who's involved in solving those problems, all bets are off, and it becomes, here's what we do. Let me give you a demo. So, and I could go on for weeks on this, but the idea of what is a problem, who's involved, and the opportunities that come from that. But that all I quantify as the gap, between 2 minutes and 80 hours. And if a sales person can make it 10 minutes, they're going to sell something. If you can simply talk to the executive, the director, the VP for 10 minutes about their world, you're going to sell something. It's a low bar, but it's incredibly difficult because, again, I've got my $100 in my pocket still. I can't find anybody who can do this. So that's just a little anecdotal and some proof there. And I've done this in Greece. I've done it in Kingdom of Jordan. I've done this in South Africa. I've done it in London, San Francisco, Orlando, Miami, etc. I've done it all over the U.S. So, and I did it in Ontario. So I can't, it's a global phenomenon. I'll put it that way. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I definitely agree with you, Brynn.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Brian. That was really great. And if I could, I see that on LinkedIn profiles. It's amazing to me who we help, why you should buy from me. I'm like, no one is going to buy from you if you're telling them how to buy from you.
We were founded in a garage. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. Yeah. So, people talk about what they want to talk about, not what their buyers want to hear.
Yeah, and the challenge with that is, and I get it, right? So this is, I think Paul brought it up about compensation and our definition of incentives. Loosely speaking, and just kind of summarizing one of the bullets he had. But the idea of, salespeople are tied to a specific product, and they have to push that product to a specific set of buyers in a specific region or within named accounts or whatever. We're automatically moving salespeople into don't solve the customer's problem, because those customers on the other side of the desk are not organizing themselves by your product set. So automatically you've cut 80% or 90% of the value of a salesperson by giving them a product to sell. That's a, I don't know, 20-30 problem. I don't know how we're going to solve that one, but to turn people loose as consultants, to turn salespeople into subject matter experts that go in and identify problems, frame out solutions, cast a vision, organize their own organization, and also perhaps, dare I say it, the other organizations that they compete with to tackle a problem is where I see a lot of value for salespeople. Unfortunately, most sales enablement efforts don't equip them with diagnostic skills and the consulting skills to be able to solve those customers' problems. And again, they're incentivized to push specific products, which in other words, everything looks like a nail and here's your hammer, but go solve problems. So, it's like, when you step back and look at it that way, it's a bit of a head scratcher. And perhaps I'm being too theoretical, but that's the challenge I see. And, it's a bit of a false feeling of value for salespeople.
Paul, did you want to add?
I think too we miss. Yeah, I was going to say, I think too we miss the human element sometimes. Where, I think about when I teach questioning strategies and talking about like first level, second level, and third level questions, and getting to the heart of how is this issue you've uncovered affecting the person and how they are measured, compensated, and evaluated on how that key player is paid, how they're evaluated in their performance reviews or subjectively by their boss, and then how they're measured with specific business outcomes and outputs that their department is responsible for, or they, personally in their role. And I have some stories I tell, kind of around that. But I always say, people don't buy what you sell by the consequences of having bought what you sold. And it may sound semantic, but I just say, they buy the results. And I say anything that comes out of your mouth when you get to your value proposition should be about how you help them make money, save time, or reduce stress. And that's only after you've asked good questions that diagnose before you prescribe. And anything you bring up, you should tether and tie to the answer to a question that you've asked them, that they've given you, to make sure it's in alignment with what their current state is and where their mind is. And then ensuring that they agree, because as we know, telling's not selling. But it's only after we find out what are the issues, how are they impacting you in your group, what is it costing you because things are that way, and then posing, creating a need and saying, so if I could help you mitigate or eliminate that issue, if I could help you save even half of that money, wouldn't it make sense to at least learn how that could work for you? And I say it's like showing the preview to a movie. Don't show them the movie, just dangle the carrot, and then the magic happens. It's fascinating because they'll actually ask you to sell them, and they're not even aware of it, because they'll say, well, what do you mean? Or by doing what? Or how do you guys do that? Now they can bring up the thing they wanted to talk about from the very beginning, but it's more meaningful because the customer asked for it. And when you present it, you can present it in a way where you add context to the answers they've given you to your questions about what their current state is and why it's a problem for them. And then, how we can help as the last piece of the sales conversation instead of the first piece, like most salespeople want to do.
I'd love to throw in one of the ways that, so when we schedule calls from LinkedIn, it's to provide insights. It's not to schedule a sales call or give a demo. It's I'd love to share some ideas, even if we don't work together. They will be valuable for you. So it's a different first call than a lot of first calls. But the insights call really is a tiny bit of discovery, and then providing, and know the questions that you ask, be prepared with the types of insights that you can provide right away that resonate, are meaningful, impactful, that they can even implement without you. If it's not something they can do without you, it's not an insight, it's a pitch. If you give insights and ideas of things they can do without you that gets them moving toward your solution, now you're providing value. And the close to that call is really a bridge of, based on what you just said and the conversation we just had, I'd love to share a story with you about one of our clients that was in almost the same situation. Are you open to hearing that? People love those case studies, and it's a great way to start talking about your solution in a way that's not pitching, and they start to resonate with it. So it's a little bit different than when someone takes your call because they're interested in your product or service. What we do on LinkedIn is we're not selling, we're providing insights. So you've got to be able to bridge that, and using a case study is a new way that's making a huge impact on people. Just like Paul said, they're like begging.
We're opening up for questions. So if any of our attendees have any questions, please submit them now. Brian had brought up a good point and wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit more, into the forces at play and the options we have to execute the sales enablement programs. What are you seeing in an area of what challenges are, what sales challenges the sales enablement pros are dealing with, and how are you looking to execute on those?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I tend to think in from what to what. So let me kind of share. So I kind of cobbled some slides together here from my background. So I think sales enablement in a general lives in a from what to what world, and so do salespeople. So by that I mean, on the buying side, if you do your job right, you're going to change how people work. So, to Paul's comments about what are you selling and the value providing, and getting in the door and open questions and eventually selling something through those techniques. There's an inherent understanding that if you sold something, you're changing how they work. So when you change how people work, I think it was easier back in the day to say, well, just trust the technology. But in today's world, what we're seeing is an evolution of business models, obviously Amazon, et cetera. I could go on and about the organizational models, the idea of the cloud, et cetera, and where that came from and how that changed business models. So there's a lot of business model shift, and we're going to see more mergers probably kicking in again, and changing go-to-market. So there's business models change. So that means the definition of value changes. Obviously, we've talked about that. But what I think we're talking about is the role of salespeople, the role of sales enablement, the role of the customer, and the roles that they have. So I'm not using job titles here on purpose, because basically in my past, I've chucked the whole entire job description that was given to me by HR because it's too rear view mirror. And I think today there are a lot more hybrid roles. So salesperson plus consultant equals, a new type of role. Project manager plus, performance consultant is a new type of role. It's a hybrid role. An L&D instructional designer plus somebody who can architect competencies and behaviors. Somebody in analytics background plus marketing, right? So there's a lot of hybrid roles, and the job descriptions don't hold up. So I think there's a go forward. There's going to be a lot of new emerging job descriptions, and we're seeing that with sales enablement. I mean, it's a whole new role. So, but the reason why these are changing is because operating models are changing, and I think that's a key execution discussion. Obviously, I'm a little bit more of an organizational guy, and this is where I play. But we've got to realize that there's a fundamental shift in how work gets done. Business models are changing. Roles have to add a different kind of value. If people can't learn the new roles, they're going to be stuck in the old ways. So this is fascinating to me. There's a lot of people who understand what's going on, but it's a bit of the boiling frog syndrome. So by that I mean They believe everybody else needs to change. They believe every other company needs to change. They believe everybody else around them needs to change except themselves, right? So this is oftentimes around the idea of, everybody hates change. But more importantly, I don't think people understand that there is a huge gap between buyers and sellers, which I've already articulated, and also a skills gap across the organization that many organizations, universities, curriculum, et cetera, don't necessarily tackle today, and it can only really be tackled through doing. So the idea of Brynn brought up about doing something, I'm a big proponent of that. So when you look at that, there's, the idea of enablement or learning is a verb. It's not a noun. It's not a function. It's constant. And that means that you have to think differently, act differently, and make a different impact. And this is the from what to what challenge. So in that from what to what, if you're moving from a marketing organization to an enablement function, from a training organization to an enablement function, these need to be binary. They need to be different. And that's a challenge. So other from what to what shifts that are happening is obviously to do more with less. So from being funded to, having to fight for your funding, from taking orders to solving customer problems, shifting from cranking out deliverables in your sales enablement function to providing services. And then I've already mentioned the idea of shifting from training or marketing or operations to enablement. What does that look like? So what that means to me is, and I know this was tackled in the Sales Enablement Conference, was the idea of what is enablement, and it's both efficiency and effectiveness. And I think enablement as an end state needs to tackle both. And I tend to think that people are looking at it one lens or the other. It's either, on the backs of individuals, skills, et cetera, or it's on process or operations or technology. But the idea of productivity is, you've got to have both efficiency and effectiveness. And the world of sales enablement is in that space. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of books around that. And a lot of management theories stop at strategy, and the idea of execution is tough, which means you have to change your operating model. So this is an interesting discussion because how you operationalize in a productivity-driven way is different than how you operationalize in the Industrial Revolution, where you broke the work down into bitty parts and you gave everybody a job to do, and they went and built the Model T Ford. Today, you have to drive productivity, which means you have to team differently. You have different skills and competencies. Your processes and technology have to align to a future state. Governance becomes incredibly important. Who gets to decide what a good conversation looks like? Who gets to decide the scope of support, if you will, of the sales team and how far they can go? Who gets to decide policies, procedures around the customer conversation, et cetera? This idea of governance and decision rights is critical in today's world, and then obviously how you manage resources. So that's just how do you operationalize it? One, it's hard, obviously. But two, you got to break the functional silos and think about it more of an outcome, which I think we've been talking about all afternoon. But when you look at the outcomes you need to drive, you have to operationalize different, which means you got to strip away the org chart, rethink the org chart. I'm not talking about a reorg, but that's what we did. You don't necessarily want to lead with that, but the roles have changed, the processes have changed, the technology is changing, et cetera, to drive the new economy. And I think there's way too much grounding in what used to work and where we've come from, as opposed to looking at where we're going and working backwards from that in kind of an Elon Musk kind of fashion. So that doesn't necessarily give you the silver bullet as an answer, but I think you have to look at your operating model if you want to operationalize enablement strategy.
Paul has a hard stop here at 1, and we're approaching the top of the hour. I like to try to stay real close. Any final thoughts, Paul, before you depart us?
Oh, just that, a lot of my passion around the Sales Enablement Society and driving the mission and function and understanding of what sales enablement is, what it can be, and the impacts we can have on organizations. It's calls like this and discussions that we're having to really get the word out and help people see what we're doing, that I just find a lot of value. And I think for us, it's just continuing to beat the drum, continuing to show results, continuing to prove ROI for what we do. And I think we'll ultimately get there. But yeah, I think I made all my points earlier, and I'm just grateful to be on the call with these thought leaders, and appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this.
And we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and insights today. It's been an amazing
Yeah,
conversation.
thanks, Paul.
Thanks,
Brynn, any final
Yeah.
thoughts? Brynn, any final thoughts from you before you?
I've got a hard stop too, so I'm going to cut. I hate to jump, but I have to say this was an amazing experience getting to know Brian and Paul, and I hope to continue to network.
Thank you so much, everyone,
Yeah,
for joining
thank you,
us.
guys.
Brian,
Thanks for hosting, Nicole. Nope, I
Thank you.
already gave my final thoughts, I think.
that's awesome. I appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
All right, thanks.
So much for participating
Bye.
in the Journey of Development. Please save the date for our next event, where we'll be talking about engaged workforce. Event panelists will share how they define engaged, how they're gauging engagement, and what they are doing to sustain or improve engagement. Thank you for your support and participation in the Journey of Development. If you have ideas to improve our program, or perhaps you have topics you'd like to have highlighted coming forward in the future, or even if you're interested in becoming a panelist, please reach out. Thanks again.